So let me ask you, when you first came here, and sort of what brought you here, and where you came from?
Well, I left school at the age of 18 in England, and immediately went to Paris for 6 months to finalize my French knowledge, and thereafter moved to Barcelona, middle of 1962, to train in a shipping company, practicos, in a shipping company in Via Laietana, which is where we are today. And at the time I lived further up Via Laietana, which in those days was Via Laietana, now it's Pau Claris, on the other side of the street, around Valencia Street now, between Valencia and Mallorca. I used to come to the office every morning with the boss, and I was doing translations for them, helping them out with English generally in the shipping business. And in the afternoons I'd go to language school or enjoy life. And this lasted until Christmas of that year, 1962. I came back again in January. I experienced major snowfall in Barcelona, where we could ski down Calle Montaner because the trams couldn't get up and down them. I experienced also big floods. I think it would have been in 62, in September, October 62, where a lot of people were killed. Life was very pleasant, very safe. In those days, you could wander around the streets with no problems. To get into your house, there was a sereno who had a key to the front doors of all of the major buildings. If he didn't appear immediately, you probably thought he was enjoying himself with one of the cleaning ladies of one of the other buildings, but that was, we didn't talk too much about that in those days.
You clapped for him, didn't you?
You used to clap very loudly and hope he came and opened the door. I remember that my father used to send me £50 every month to survive, and after 3 months I said, don't send next month because I don't need it, I can't spend £50. £50 was about 8,000 pesetas in those days. The house, the family where I lived, provided food, 3 meals a day, bedroom, laundry, for the princely sum of 3,000 pesetas a month. So you can imagine why the other 5,000 I didn't know much what to do with, except to fill my little cart with petrol, which cost 10 pesetas a litre.
What kind of car did you have?
I had a small Morris convertible, very small car.
There must have been quite something here. Morris
yeah, there were about 100,000 cars in Barcelona in those days, so I was expected to be a wealthy millionaire, which was a bit risky. But you could park outside the house and then just roll down the hill to the office. I can remember also skiing in La Molina in those days. Used to be lots of snow and very few people. Not a lot of people you knew how to ski in those days. And I remember always big traffic jams at the weekend, even in those days, to go to Montserrat or to go to Sitges or to go up the north coast. The Costa Brava was too far away in those days because the roads were pretty bad. Yeah.
2 lanes, most of them.
Yeah, with very big potholes. I once drove from Barcelona to Lisbon to go on a convention, and I set off at 5 in the morning. I can remember it very clearly. 5 in the morning from Barcelona. I got as far as the border around Badajoz during the day. I didn't make Lisbon in the day, but I tell you, the car took a real pounding.
Yeah.
The exhaust pipe broke. I had to have that welded on the way. So it was an interesting trip. Of course, very little road traffic except trucks, heavy trucks, very slow. The old donkey around a corner with a pile of something on it.
Yeah.
And but it was very interesting. I also went on a ship here, and I visited on that ship. It was a cargo ship on a special regular line from Spain to the Gulf of Mexico, including Houston. And I sailed on it from Barcelona to Valencia, Alicante, Malaga, Cadiz, and then out to one of the Canary Islands. I don't remember which one. And I stayed there visiting shipping agents for a couple of days, and then flew back. In those days, there weren't a lot of planes, but I flew back to Barcelona, I suppose via Madrid. I can't remember very clearly, but I remember it was a jet. So it must be one of the first jets of Iberia.
And here at that time, things obviously were more secure, more ordered. Mm-hmm. Was there lots to do for you as a young person? What did you do in your free time? What kind of time did you have when you were here then?
I was fortunate that I actually knew nobody here at all. At least I would have known nobody at all had I not met on my last evening in Paris, in a small party, a Spanish boy and his sister. And they gave me an address and a contact number here, which of course I didn't use to begin with because I didn't speak enough Spanish to communicate. But eventually, through this contact, I made a pretty big circle of friends in various areas of Barcelona, with whom we'd have gone skiing, gone out for the odd drink. There was, of course, in those days you could not take out a young lady. That was totally taboo. Young ladies stayed at home or were with the aunt, and you could see them on the Paseo de Gracia and smile and wink or something, but to go out in the evening was not on at all. I mean, I was 18, they would have been 16, 17, maybe 18. Not easy.
Couldn't go out on a date?
No. You could go to the beach with them in the weekend, something like that. But by 6, they had to be home. Actually, even my male friends had to be back home to go to Sunday Misa at 6 o'clock. So that was the limit. So after that, we were back at home and watching a very poor television program.
Did you have a television when you were?
They had a television in the house where I lived. They had no central heating. They had one small water heater which they put in when I arrived, so you could have a hot shower, well, small hot shower. And in the dining room, a dining-cum-living room, it was a big apartment, ground floor, principal, so it had even a garden behind it in Pau Claris in those days. Well, what was Via Laietana in those days is now Pau Claris. The kitchen was a very dark hovel, which was, went in there. But the food came out well. I was never sick in 12 months. I drank and ate exactly as they did, with sometimes a bit of wine. The main heating was one single bar electric fire in the dining room, which was sometimes put on. I think it was as cold then in the winter as it is now. I mean, it would have been 6 degrees, 8 degrees, 10 degrees minimum at night. And in the summer, the excitement was to go to the local cinema, which would have air conditioning. And it wasn't to see the film, it was to be able to al fresco for a few hours. I think also it cost about 5 pesetas, the film sales.
Was a local cinema? There was one on Via Laietana, I know, for a long time, the Princesa, which was occupied. I don't know if that was there then when you...
I think we normally went on Paseo de Gracia. I think there were cinemas on Paseo de Gracia.
So could you go out with your mates, so to speak, with your male friends? Could you go to bars? You could go and have...
that was... I mean, you had a lot of fun in that respect. I mean, obviously there weren't people getting drunk. People were... you could see there was discipline. I remember my stepbrother came a couple of years after me, also with my car, and he was up on Montjuic one evening, probably being too friendly with his Spanish teacher. A Guardia Civil knocked on the window of the car and suggested that he shouldn't be doing what he was doing. He was carted off to jail for the night, and the girl was accompanied home. I don't know whether they told the police. The police told the parents what they thought they might have been doing. Anyway, he was out after 24 hours. But you had to any form of public intimacy was not allowed in those days. That's for certain. Any more than bikinis were allowed on the beach. So in that respect, it was very strict.
So in that respect, you did your life as well was sort of affected by it, because obviously if your friends were living here and you were living here, then that kind of discipline would in some way...
Well, I came from a very disciplined English boarding school, so it was a bit freer here than being in boarding school, that's for certain.
Were there a lot of poor people? Did you see a lot of poor people in those days?
Not really. I mean, not in this part of town. I must admit, I once applied for a job. I was looking for some time to spend in the afternoon after I'd finished my Spanish course. I thought I would do some translations, and I looked at advertisements in the newspaper, and I once went to visit a company which was on the Gran Via. But the Gran Via, the same as today, is a very long road. Well, where the number I had to go to, the road was so bad. I mean, it wasn't made up. It was potholes and puddles, and I decided that if I went to work there, I'd spend more on my car getting there and back and repairing it than I ever would make being an English teacher or a translator. So that job was not taken up. The other thing we did was we tried to grow mushrooms. That was one of my projects, to grow mushrooms in the back garden of this house. And we bought some mushroom spawn, I think it's called, and went and got some horse manure from Villafranca del Penedès, from a friend of the people I was staying with. And we put, we tried growing mushrooms, not very successfully, as an extra bit of income. In those days they said, invest 3,000 pesetas and soon you'll be making 15,000 a month, which was not at all true. I think we had one plate of mushrooms in 3 months.
Yeah. Where I'm from, there was a long period of time where a company advertised that you should buy chinchillas, which were a small animal, and reproduce at a great rate.
Similar idea.
You turn the same amount of money in just a month, you could have so many chinchillas that you would be rich. But it didn't ever.
No.
A lot of people.
And nobody told you who was going to kill them and skin them, so you could sell the skins. You're not going to sell the whole animals. That was a similar scam to the mushroom, I think.
Yeah. And the church, were you aware of a fairly extensive influence that the church had on public life here in those days? Yeah,
definitely. The misa, the misa was the sort of regulatory item, at least in the weekend. I didn't notice so much in the week, of course, but I was well aware that I was in a Catholic country and that religion was an important item, and the children I would say of my age, or young people of my age, were absolutely strictly adhering to the rules of the religion, and they went to church, church, yeah, I suppose it is, when they had to. I think this also was to do with the fact that the young ladies were supposed to stay at home until they get married. So, in that respect, the system was very different from today.
It's curious, isn't it, how in a sense, how were things? It seems like things were okay then, and yet everyone must have been underneath, seething in some fashion. Or we talked to somebody yesterday who was saying that for her those days, people were scared, that they were cowed, that people weren't really happy, but that they were cowed. And that you sort of got that sense of no one being able to do or willing to do anything in a public situation, and that people were quite poor in some sense.
Maybe I didn't have my eyes open that wide. Obviously it was a very different life from being in a boarding school. This was, apart from Paris, this was my first experience of being totally free, except, when you live in a family, of course, you've got to be home for the meals. You can't have them waiting around. You've got to be polite and courteous. But I didn't feel, and I was, as I told you, I was driving around quite a lot in my small car. So I went to Madrid on occasions. I've been down to Valencia. I've been across to Bilbao. I didn't feel so controlled by the police in traffic, at least in those days, as one does now. You go the whole time now with looking at you're not doing more than 121 kilometers an hour. In those days, I used to go 121 kilometers an hour everywhere, which was about all the car could do anyway. But and I've never was stopped. I was never asked to see a driving license or anything in 1 year.
Well, I know.
Where are we going?
What was like? Tell me. That's very nice what you were just saying. That the high-tech communication. Then what were you saying was?
Oh, telephoning was a major hassle, even internally, let alone to try and connect up abroad. But I also remember having to go and collect a package from the Correos, at the same place obviously as it is today, and a number of forms to fill out for customs clearance for something of very little importance, I can't remember. But that was quite an experience. Of course, in those days, you know, in the summer, it was in August, probably 30 degrees outside, it'd probably be 32 degrees inside the Correos, so it wasn't exactly comfortable waiting in a line.
What was the schedule of a business day? Did you stop for a long coffee in the middle of the morning?
No, it was fairly serious. I remember 9 o'clock start. Then we did go for lunch, I presume about 1:30. And I didn't go back to the office in the afternoons. I was supposed to be studying or whatever I wanted to do. So I was only working 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. The boss, I remember the boss of the company, his father was also there. The boss must have been, I suppose, 30 in those days, very old man for me at the age of 18. The father was probably 50, 60. But their uncle was in fact the uncle of the boss was the private physician for Picasso. And they told me a story one day. They said, I think it must have been great uncle had died, and they were cleaning out the loft, and they found a picture by Picasso. And what did I think about it? And I, at the age of 18, I didn't even know who Picasso was, I think. And they had an American interested in buying it, and he was offering $80,000, I can remember. And they consulted me as to whether I thought this was a good price for a Picasso painting. And all I know is that they did sell it for $80,000, which for them in those days was a lot of money. And this American dealer went straight over to New York and sold it for $250,000. So perhaps I should have told them to hang on for a bit.
Good. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you. I was just thinking on the way over here for some reason of when I was in Formentera in 1968, I can remember having lunch with some of the neighbors invited me to come to lunch to their house. And all during lunch, there was this woman screaming from another room. And they asked they asked for disculpas because it was an aunt who was dying of cancer, and they didn't have the money to buy morphine at the time. And so she was in a house with not enough painkillers and a lot of pain. Oof. And it really struck me at that time. I can remember how surprised I was and shocked that I was. And then but I never spent much time in Barcelona, so I don't know if in Barcelona those kinds of things were evident. I mean, things like the absolute lack of any kind of healthcare system in those days.
Yeah, I of course wouldn't have noticed it because fortunately I've always had good health. I've never been involved in hospitals or doctors except for normal checkups. So I wouldn't really know what happened. I do remember though, the old aunt who lived in the house where I was staying, in the time I was here, she did actually die. She was, I think, she looked about 80 and very dried up, and so she must have been on her way out, but I don't remember any, just 1 minute she was there, 1 minute she was gone, and there was a funeral, and I think I went to the funeral, I hope I did. And that was it. So whether it was for lack of health assistance, I don't know.
When you came back to Madrid?
At first I came back to Madrid. I obviously visited Barcelona several times between 70 and 86 when I came back. Where
were you when Franco died, on the day he died?
I was in Italy when Franco died. He died one day after my birthday, so I remember the date very well. I was offered a job in Madrid the following March, I was on a business visit to Madrid. I met quite an important man, and he wanted me to come and work for him. So I agreed that I could start on the 1st of September, which is what I did. And I've been in Spain ever since. Stayed for a year, 10 years outside Madrid. We're living towards the mountains to the northwest on the Carretera de la Coruña. And I moved to Barcelona with family, lock, stock and barrel, on the 1st or 2nd of January 1986, and lived in Valvidrera on the top of the hill, just near Tibidabo. Up until now, really. So, I mean, I don't live up there anymore, but that was where we started.
And so when you came back, obviously a lot had changed.
Yes, first of all,
in the process of
Barcelona was twice as expensive as Madrid as far as housing was concerned in 1986. That was the first shock.
Huh.
I think Barcelona's always been a more disciplined city than Madrid, definitely, both in driving and in general goings-on. I think Madrid people enjoy life and don't care too much about what goes on around them, whereas the Catalans have always been very serious, hard-working people, which they still are. So for me, it was a bit of a change that when I was there in 1960s, of course, Catalan was not spoken in the street. It was spoken a bit in the family where I was, but every now and then they slipped into it by mistake. But obviously when I came back in 86, I was very much more exposed to the interest people had for Catalan and for using Catalan on a day-to-day basis, which didn't exist.
When you were here first, there wasn't present in public discourse.
You could say that to come and study in Spanish in Barcelona in the 60s was quite a viable proposition. Now I believe it's not so viable because of the influence of Catalan, especially on the study aspect. I have a daughter who's studying in university in Sabadell, and of course she can write in Castellano, but all of the lessons, or 90% of the lessons, are given in Catalan. So you have to have an extra effort to follow the goings-on of the school.
Yeah, no, that's right. And what other sorts of changes did you remark when you came back?
Well, obviously not shockingly, because as I say, I was in business involved quite a lot with Catalonia. Although we were based in Madrid, we shipped all over, and Barcelona was a main point for manufacture of the trailers and equipment we used for our transport business. So I was quite often in Barcelona, and I say between 1971, when I started living in Italy, I used to come to Spain at least twice a year, I would think, in which case I would also come through Barcelona. I covered the whole of Spain and Portugal, so I had quite a territory to cover, but as I also covered Africa and the Middle East, so between one thing and another I didn't get here as often as I might have liked to. But so the changes crept up slowly. They wasn't a major culture shock as it might have been going to Morocco or somewhere like that.
Good. Great. Good. That's fine.
Did you want to ask him about Tarradellas coming back?
Yes.
Have you done that?
No, I haven't, but I will. And I appreciate
Tarradellas.
that. Were you here when Tarradellas came back? No.
I know the name from the street. I don't.
The Catalan president who was in exile.
No.
And let me ask you, you were, however, I think in Madrid on the 23rd of February in 81 when Tejero came into the Congress.
And when my third child was born on that day.
Really?
23F, sí.
Which news did you get first?
Believe it or not, my wife at the time was in quite a posh clinic outside Madrid, which is where the royal family have had their children. And there was a big kerfuffle in the corridor outside my wife's room after the baby was born, but I knew through the phone. I was on my way there, I think, when there was a lot of noise, and she'd imagined that somebody had had triplets or quadruplets by the rushing around, and they said, no, there's the golpe de estado, and you know, it's, so when I phoned my mother in the evening to tell her, and she thought I was phoning to tell her that I was escaping back to the UK to get away from the invasion of the troops or something. So I remember that date quite clearly. Yeah.
And it was interesting to me how the people reacted around me at that time. I was also informed at that time.
Well, I was, I mean, you know, I was between home and the clinic was outside Madrid. It was in Aravaca, I think, or something like that. So I didn't see what was going on in the city centre. I didn't even see a roadblock or anything unusual. So no, I can't say that it was a big day in my life, except that the third daughter was born, or the third child was born.
Good. Good. Just
roll it up, wrap it up.